Okay, class, we're about to start Unit 8, Integers and Signed Numbers. Section A, Adding and Subtracting Integers. The set of integers consists of the whole numbers 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on, and their opposites -1, -2, -3, -4, and so on. We usually visualize the integers on a number line. The concept of opposites is very important with integers. We have these examples. We have 6 and this opposite notation of -6, and we will write it out as -6 or just plain -6 here. Then we have -3. This opposite notation is the negative sign, parenthesis -3, and we have +3 or just write 3. Now we have -8. It'll be the opposite of -8, and we will have +8 or just plain 8. And 5, we had -5. So we had -5 or 5. And we had -1. We had the opposite of -1, which will give us +1 or 1. Then we have 0. There is no opposite notation for 0, so it'll just be 0 or 0 or 0. Now, because 0 is not positive or negative, it doesn't have an opposite. The tricky part about adding and subtracting integers is that you cannot trust the operation symbol, negative. Sometimes to perform an addition problem, you add, but sometimes you actually subtract. The same is true for subtraction problems. Once you have determined that you are combining two integers through addition or subtraction, here is what you need to do. Get through and change any minus, parenthesis, negative to a positive or addition sign. Look at the sign directly in front of each number. If the two signs are the same, add the values. If the two signs are different, subtract the values. The answer will have the same sign as the larger number. Okay, now we go to the next page. We have our examples. We have here -3 plus -5. They have the same sign, so you add them together and carry the sign. Now, you can also think this. 3 plus 5, both of these are positive. You will add them together and get 8. So 5 is the larger numeral and 5 is negative. So -3 plus -5 equals -8. Now we come here to the other side. We have a -5 minus a -3. So this will become -5 plus 3 because remember, this is the opposite of a -3, which will give us a +3. Opposite signs, you subtract. So think 5 minus 3 equals 2. Even though this is -5 plus 3, they have different signs, so you would subtract. Just make this a regular subtraction problem. So it's 2. So 5 is the larger numeral, and 5 is negative. So our final answer would be negative. So if you look here, let's just take this for a second. 5 minus 3 and -5 plus 3. Do you notice both of them have an answer of 2? The only difference between these two is that you had to write the sign of being negative. So basically, whenever you encounter problems like this, just do regular subtraction and then write the number, and all you have to do at the end is determine the sign. So it's still going to be a 2, but then you look at the larger number to see if the 2 is going to be negative or positive. Now, let's try some examples here. We have -8 plus -6. They have the same sign, so you add them together. 8 and 6 is 14, and you carry the sign. So it'll be a -14. Now, -9 plus 15, we'll think 15 minus 9 because they have different signs. And we know 15 minus 9 is 6. And since 15 is the larger number and is positive, your answer will remain positive. Now, -4 minus 7. Both of these have the same sign, so you just add them together. It'll be -11. Now, 5 minus a -10, We know minus a negative in parentheses will give us a positive. So it'd be 5 plus 10, which we know is 15. Now we have negative 4 minus a negative 6. That's the same as saying negative 4 plus 6. Now again, we think of this, since they have different signs, we would think in our head as 6 minus 4, which gives us 2. And we look back here and see that 6 is the larger number and it's positive. So it will remain a positive 2. Now we have 2 minus 18. They have opposite signs, so we know we subtract. So we could do 18 minus 2, which we know is 16. But the 18 is the larger number and its sign is negative. So it'll be a negative 16. Now, we come here. We have negative 7 plus negative 7. They have the same sign, so you add them together and carry the sign. So it'll be a negative 14. Now here we have a negative 7 minus the opposite of a negative 7. So it'll be a negative 7 plus 7. Negative 7 plus 7, we know we would think of this as 7 minus 7, which is 0. And since we know 0 is not positive or negative, we know we would leave it as 0. Now we come here. We have a lengthier problem, but we could take care of this. This would end up being a negative 8. A minus a negative 5 will be plus 5, plus 7 minus 1. Now we can go from left to right. Negative 8 plus 5, we know we would think of this as 8 minus 5, which we know would give us 3. And since the 8 is negative, we know this will be negative 3. And we'll bring down our plus 7 minus 1. Now we have negative 3 plus 7. We would think of this as 7 minus 3, which we know is 4. And since 7 is positive, and it's the larger number of the two, 4 will be positive. And we'll bring down our minus 1. And 4 minus 1, we know is 3. Now we come here. We have negative 9 minus 2. We know we add them together and carry the sign. So that'll be negative 11 plus 4 minus a negative 3 minus 5. Negative 11 plus 4, we know we would think of this as 11 minus 4, which is 7. But since 11 is the larger number in negative, it'll be negative 7. It'll be minus a negative 3 minus 5. Now we know minus a negative 3 would make this positive. So we have negative 7 plus 3 minus 5. Now negative 7 plus 3 is the same as 7 minus 3, which will give us 4. But since the 7 is larger than the 3, we will carry the negative sign. So we add negative 4, and we'll bring down our negative 5. Now we know negative 4 minus 5, they have the same sign. So we add them together and carry the sign. So it'll be negative 9. Now we come to section B. It says multiplying and dividing integers. Once you have determined that you are multiplying two integers, proceed as follows. Multiply or divide the numbers as usual, ignoring the signs. The sign of the answer is positive if the two numbers had the same sign, negative if the two numbers had different signs. Okay, so here we'll take a quick look. Now the rules for multiplication and division are the same. So if you notice here, we're dividing two numbers, they have the same sign. That means automatically it will become a positive number, because we would think 10 divided by 2 is 5. And since the numbers have the same sign, so the answer is positive. Now we have negative 2 times 3. We'll think 2 times 3, which is 6. The numbers have different signs, so the answer is negative. Now, the difference between these problems and addition and subtraction is it doesn't matter if the higher or lower number have the opposite sign. As long as one of them have the opposite sign and the other is positive, your answer is going to be negative. So now let's take a look here. We have a positive 8 times a negative 4. So we know 8 times 4 is 32. But since one of these numbers is negative, it'll be a negative 32. Now we have a negative 5 times a negative 7. So we think 5 times 7, which is 35. And since both of these numbers have a negative sign, it'll be positive. Now we have 54 divided by negative 6. 54 divided by 6 we know is 9. But since one of these numbers is negative, it'll be a negative 9. Next, we have negative 33 divided by 11. We'll think 33 divided by 11, which is 3. And since one of these signs is negative, we'll write negative 3. Now, we have negative 3 times negative 7. We think 3 times 7, which is a positive 21. And since both signs are negative, it will remain positive. Now we come here. Negative 50 divided by negative 10. We think 50 divided by 10, which is 5. A negative divided by a negative is positive, so it will remain positive 5. Now, we come down here. Now, what we could do is this here. Since we have all multiplication, let's count how many negative signs we have. We have 1, 2, 3 negative signs. Now, listen. Before we said if one of the numbers are negative, what it is really is if we have an odd amount of numbers that are negative and it's all multiplication or division, then that means that that answer would be negative. So what you would do is you would count up your negatives, and if it's an odd amount of negatives and it's all multiplication or division, your answer will be negative. So we have 1, 2, 3 negative signs, so our answer we know would be negative. So we would think 2 times 5 is 10, times 1 is 10, times 6 is 60. And since we have an odd amount of negative signs, it'll be negative 60. Now we come here. We have an even amount of negative signs. We have 4 negative signs. Now, whenever you multiply or divide, and all of your, and it's all multiplication or division, you count how many negative signs you have. If it's an even amount, your answer is positive. So we have an even amount of negatives here. So we would do 2 times 5 is 10, times 1 is 10, times 6 is 60. So it's positive 60. Now, we scroll down. It says the same rules for adding and subtracting and multiplying and dividing apply when you have positive and negative fractions or decimals. But one thing I want to talk about before we do this, going back up here to where we multiply these negative numbers, if there was a 0 multiplied to these negative numbers, then automatically your answer would be 0. It wouldn't have a positive or negative sign. So that's just for your information. Now we go here. We have a negative 4.33 minus 0.9. So they have the same sign. So we know we would add them. So we'll take 4.33 plus 0.9. We can add a 0 here. This will be 3. 3 plus 9 is 12. Carry our 1. And we will have 5. Yeah, this is, we have 5.23. Having a little technical difficulty here. So we would end up with 5.23. And then since both of these had a negative sign, it'll be a negative 5.23. Okay, now we come here. We have this negative 2/3 minus a negative 1/2. So this would end up being a negative 2/3 plus 1/2. Now, before we do anything here, let's find the common denominator. We know the common denominator here is 6. And we know we would have to multiply this 2/3 or negative 2/3 by 2/2. And this 1/2 by 3/3. 2 times 2 is 4. And we know this would be negative. 1 times 3 is 3. So we have 3, 6. Negative 4, 6 plus 3, 6. We know that our denominator will remain 6. And then we would, since these have opposite signs, we would take 4 minus 3. We could come over here to the side. We know that that is 1. So we know it'll be a 1, 6. However, 4 is larger than 3. So it'll be a negative 1, 6. Now we come here and we'll multiply. We know we have 2 negatives here. So our answer would be positive. So we'll take 4.33 times 0.9. And we know we'll rewrite this to 433 times 9. And we will multiply.